And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Benched with Bubba, episode 446. Returning guest to the show, good friend of the show. It's been a little while, though, unfortunately, but we are ramping up still because every day is another day of waiting for baseball season to begin. But we're going to chat up some fantasy baseball here, some DC talk, some OC talk, some super talk, all the NFBC talk. And you can most importantly find this gentleman on Twitter at CTM Baseball, the one, the only Matt Modica. How we doing, my friend?
I'll be doing a lot better if at some point today they announce an agreement. I mean, like we were just talking, it's like Groundhog's Day. You get all excited. I mean, last night when they announced that they didn't have a deal, I mean, I was just furious. I cleaned out my garage, got my golf stuff ready. You know, it's time for young Rory to get back in action and hack up some courses out here in Jersey.
Yep. I'm with you, man. Like I literally, when they said there was no deal, I just kind of put my laptop away, just kind of like walked away for a bit. I'm like, this freaking stinks. I just want to get going. We all want it. So hopefully soon. It seems like it's just kind of minute things, but the owners keep throwing more stuff out there apparently. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's always follow the money, as they say. Follow the money.
Yeah, I think they're close enough, though. I mean,
I think they are too. It's just a couple little things that I think eventually some cooler heads have to prevail.
And one last thing. I mean, like I hear people saying that there's fake deadlines. There really is a deadline because, you know, the calendar is going to work against them at some point. Like, I don't see how it's any time before April 15th. And I'll go to Vegas, as I just tweeted out, and draft as scheduled. If it's, 162, April 15th, opening day, no 7-inning doubleheaders, though. I think that's trash.
Yeah.
I don't want any part of that. So I think they know the calendar is against them. And you got to give pitchers, I mean, at least 5
time
weeks.
to go.
I mean, really, they probably need 6 weeks. I don't want to see guys getting injured and stuff like that. So hopefully.
Yeah, we're seeing more and more videos of guys throwing on the side. I think they learned something, at least from the 2020 season, of how to kind of prep. But yeah, I'm with you still. Some of these guys don't have the accessibility to be ready. So we'll see how ready they are. But we dealt with it once. Hopefully we get it again. I'm with you on the April 15th. Like I tweeted it out. I'm not the only one. Many have that. It's the Jackie Robinson 75th anniversary. As much as people say the owners don't care about money, they can sell a boatload of stuff that has that logo on it, and it is a very big day. You miss that day, it's kind of that'll have some heat coming down. Let's just put it that way. So we'll see. But I'm with you also. No, I can't stand the 7-inning doubleheaders. No, it's not baseball. It's beer league softball. That's not baseball.
There you go. Perfect.
I digress. Let's have some fun here. Let's talk some NFBC. For those that don't know Matt, well, you've been living under a rock because he's one of the best NFBC players out there. A couple of years ago, had a monster season and just crushed it. And you're always tweeting things out. Your team graph paper, which I think is absolutely amazing. I love it. It's aesthetically pleasing to the eye because I have horrible penmanship. And if you just give me like a blank page, there's no uniformity to it. But I want to talk to you about, you do snake drafts, you do auction drafts, you do DCs, you do different price points. So we're just going to go down the list of kind of how you approach things, because I know you do approach them differently. A lot of guys do, based on what's going on. So let's just start with the DCs. That's what everyone's doing, and we're still doing, unfortunately, because we're waiting for the call. But there's the 150, that's the basics. There's the 12-team 50s if people want to, but there's a 15-team 150. But then it goes up. You're in the 4 honey a lot. You like that one. There's the super DCs you got coming up this weekend. How do you approach these different price scales differently?
Well, I mean, even if we took out price scales, just say like you are in Tout Wars, right?
Yeah.
So I think Tout Wars is going to weigh a lot heavier for you than certain other leagues. I'm not saying you don't care about the other leagues, but if you're in Tout Wars, I think you want to win Tout Wars more than, maybe your home league. I don't know. I'm just like trying to give that, for instance. And, throughout a season, if you do a lot of drafts and you have like your volume player, certain things, obviously price points are going to affect you. Look, if I have a 150 DC that's in contention for an overall, I'm going to pay a lot more attention to that. But if it's not, the higher price points, which I don't think anybody would argue, are of more importance to me. So, I mean, just with the 4 honey, I just think people say it's incestual. I know that's been the phrase word that's been getting thrown around, which it is. There are, there's a handful of us that, consistently playing that. But I think that one, it's the closest thing you're going to get to a main event prep. And look, there'll be a 400 where certain players will fall that shouldn't, but that's not the norm. It's a tighter board. And, before you enter any draft, whatever it is, and you get your KDS, which I think is important. The great thing about KDS is you're not necessarily getting the pick you wanted, but you have an idea to set yourself up for success in those first 5 rounds. You have to have an idea of the foundation. Even if you haven't been drafted, but have been studying the ADP, and like I said, I try and get it to at least 10 drafts in a 2 or 3 week period. Because it's all the data is stale anyway. So when you start going back a month or more, I don't think it's effective. You're dealing with certain people that are drafting, consistently, so they're seeing it in real time. But I'm not putting any of it down, but when you go from the 400 to the 1000s, it's a tougher thing. I don't know. I don't think anybody's going to make an argument on that. And then, there's the Super DC, which is going to be an insanely tight board. And I'm going to approach that a little different because I have to assume I'm going into that with the idea of the pitching is going to be so tight in that league.
Kind of a main event style where it gets pushed up.
And especially the thing with the draft champions, the hardest part of that right now is we don't know the majority of the closing situations. We're speculating on, hopefully educated assumptions. We're saying this guy's got the skills, he should get it versus the guy that doesn't. But, so you gotta, there's only, let's say, 6 guys that we think have the job. So those 6 guys are going to be weighed a lot more heavily right now because there's no fab. There's no in-season pickup. And, a guy like Rafael Iglesias, I didn't say it right. The way Rob Silver says it is just amazing. That's the way I want to say it.
You got to have that Canadian accent to it, that French Canadian accent to kind of.
I got that Brooklyn accent, so it still works as well. But the whole point of that is, he's deserving of a 3rd round pick. He's probably returned 3rd round value anyway, but the fact that you're locking that down. Now, obviously, there's some really good hitters and starting pitchers you're going to pass up. But, as you go further down the rounds, those guys, the closers aren't there, or at least, the upper echelon closers and stuff like that. There's a difference between Hendricks and Hader and the guys you're speculating on in the, like a Corey Knebel or somebody like that. There's a huge difference there.
Big time.
So all saves aren't created equal. But also, too, what I've found for me, and I'm somebody that's always really liked to build on pitching, but this year, after the top 3 for me, I'm willing to, maybe grab one in the 3rd or the 4th and then pound it more in that 6 to 10 range. There's guys I like, or the end of the 5th. So I'm seeing these really good hitters fall to me in, say, the 3rd or 4th round, and it gets tough. So if you didn't take a pitcher in the first 2 rounds, you got to at least know the landscape and where you're going to get your pitching. Who are the, say, not the upper echelon closers, but the guys you believe in that have the talent, that have done it before, that are in spots that they should have an opportunity to close. That's what you're hoping for too, the opportunity. Opportunity is everything in life, in fantasy, in sports. Some people get the opportunity and they run with it. Some people fail, so I've been more, I would say, hitting early because I just think that there's just some crazy values. Now, obviously, if I get, I'm definitely not opposed to taking a Cole or a Burns, and Wheeler for me is the clear-cut number 3, just for the strides he's made. I don't know if I'm running on a little too long, so
no, I'm taking notes. I got tons of questions for you, so we're good.
If you want to jump in, and so yeah, that's just the things that I've noticed. And because I don't think there's a lot of separation, from certain tiers after the high end guys.
Yeah, we have a lot of similar thoughts on the draft, at least. Let's put it that way. Because in years past, I would be more inclined to make sure I got an ace in the first 2 rounds, maybe even pocket aces, because there's things change so much. But I feel that kind of second grouping and even like the third grouping after that, it's so much larger with so many viable like in games you can see where things work out well compared to previous years. Like they all have road bumps. That's why they're not going so early. But there's a lot more feasibility you can see with things kind of panning out where I am going a lot more hitter heavy this year for sure. Get those steals where you can because that dries up so quick. Where starting pitching, you can kind of navigate. If you are going hitting early, though, kind of what you were saying with the closers, have a plan because you're gonna have to kind of navigate the Knables of the world, Sotos of the world, and that kind of deal, which makes things interesting. But going back to what you said about KDS, I love the term straight Bubba, as you guys say. It's because that's what I've been doing all season, and I heard you say it. I think it was on Rob's show. Or no, it was MLB Moving Average with Big John Stud. And I thought it was perfect because the way the first round opens up these days, it is kind of like, okay, you got the big elite stolen base guys early. Then you got this middle area where you can probably go starting pitching. Then you got these kind of outfielders that are good, but they're not obviously the top of the board. It's a weird dynamic. So are you still just going straight Butta everywhere, or are you mixing it up? How are you doing that?
I've been basically I leave it straight Butta for the fact that early on I was getting like 10 to 15 consistently. And then I was getting pretty much like 1 to 5 for like 2 or 3 of them. But I've gotten some 7, 8. So it hasn't been where I'm just getting one side of the board. Yeah. Obviously, if it was I'm just getting all like top 3 picks, then I would start moving it around because you're starting to look at a different player pool from each end of the draft. I mean, it's just how it falls in most instances, at least early on. And so, I mean, for me, I think you have to ask like questions. Like I think an honest question in the last 1,000 DC that I'm in, I think we're still in the 22nd round or whatever. I had the 4th pick. And for me, it's, Turner, Tatis, Cole, top 3, however you want to put them. And I don't think Burns is far out from there. I mean, just look what the guy's done. Look what he did in 167 innings last year. He struck out 234 batters. I may be off, 1 or 2 here or there, but it wasn't really a big difference from what Garrett Cole can deliver. So in that one, I went Burns at 4. What my mindset was, but see, I had a plan. Burns, he to me is one of the supreme aces. I think that's Captain Obvious. Everybody's on that. He's a consensus top 2 pitcher. So my mindset there is when I'm picking in the 2nd round, whatever that is, like 26th, I have a good shot at say a Tim Anderson. So I'm looking at, is it better to start with Bo Bichette and the best available pitcher there? Or is it better to start with Burns and say Tim Anderson? I mean, Tim Anderson might not make it back there.
But it's a good point, though, for sure.
But Tim Anderson does make it to, the 5th pick of the 3rd round. And I've gotten that a couple of times in the last 2 weeks. So it's not like it doesn't happen. So I didn't even take Anderson in the end of the 2nd round because there was enough hitters that I was willing to gamble I'd get one of them come that pick in the whatever it was 3-4. So I took Josh Hader because he was there. Again, I got my lockdown guy. I've done enough of these where I know how the board's going to shake and who to get later on. How I got to build it. And, Tim Anderson was there for me. So it worked out. Did I get a little lucky? Yeah. But, if Tim Anderson wasn't there, I wasn't done because there was a couple of guys that I was comfortable with at that part to start off with my hitting foundation. So, I mean, that's just an approach. I'm not saying it's the right approach. That's the approach that's just the way I looked at it. Yeah. Somebody might say, you're a fool. You should stop Bo Bichette and, go from there, which is fine. I don't say that I'm right and, anything like that. You do what works for you. Like I've done enough drafts and with the Tyler Jones, with like filling, I can't do their method. Their method is pretty similar, where in the first 4 rounds, they got 2 closers, a starter, and a hitter.
Yep.
And that works for them. Casey Cha said said Tyler Jung is the best draft champions probably last year when we were having dinner in Vegas, and I agreed with him. I've seen enough of what he did and what he did last year to even confirm that. And we all know what Phil did last year. So you can't do. I guess what I'm trying to say is don't copy other people's strategies if you can't execute that.
Exactly. That's the biggest thing.
It's like the get rich quick. You want to try and you hear somebody promote a stock or a player. It's
because we all know Jung and Phil, and I even told Toby on our last podcast we started doing starting pitchers. So of course Pocket Aces comes up because that's what he does. And I said I draft next to him this weekend in a draft. I drafted next to him before, and I said, I know what you're pretty much coming out of your first 5 rounds with.
Mm-hmm.
I just know that because that's what you're going to do. Does it mean I can draft like you? No, because what you do from round 6 on, you're much smarter. You have your method to your madness. That's way different, and it doesn't work for me, and that's why I don't draft that way. But we can all, like they say, there's many ways to skin a cat.
But I mean, Toby's been very successful at that.
Very good at it.
It's not like he's just randomly doing it. It's something he's been doing for a couple of years. And it's worked for him.
It worked for him.
You should continue to do it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. But it's like you were mentioning with the KDS, and then a lot of that comes out to is you plan out your first 5 rounds, and it's a great strategy. I've had Bloomfield on talking about building backwards to kind of plan out your draft. Jenny Butler talks about the different flow charts to things. Just whatever you need to do to, like you said, kind of see where things land. And you just kind of talked it out with, okay, if I go Cole here, then I go Anderson, or if I go Cole and then I go Hader and then I go here. That's just kind of planning your draft. How does things set up to set my base up to go forward? That gives you a good team, because they say you can't win a draft early, but you can sure lose it if you start making a bad decision and start putting the wrong roster construction right out the gate. So if you start throwing stuff at the wall and hoping it sticks, you're going to be in trouble. So when you're doing these different price ranges, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I just wanted to ask. So you got your 150s, you got the 400s, the 1000s, so on. Are you using the 150s more of an experiment to kind of see different strategies to see how they play out in different formats so you can fine tune it? Because it is 100% accurate. The higher price range you go, I did an OC the other night. It was the first one of this season that I've done. And it was like a whole nother zip code of things going off the board. I knew the player pool, so it wasn't the end of the world, but it was just you're seeing dudes hop 40 picks early. You're seeing I had my queue set up thinking, okay, I'm good. Nope, not good. But you have backup plans because you know what you're doing. But are you using the 150s kind of for that idea?
I did. I signed up for my first 150 the other night. I was excited. I thought we were getting a deal. And I know the Super's coming up, so I wanted to, I don't want to stop now, right before the Super, take a week off. I want to continue to be into that. And it just fell in. I got the number 1 pick in the 150, and I wound up going 5 straight hitters. No, 5 straight hitters and 2 pitchers, I believe. So, that's just how it felt. But I knew once I took the, 2 hitters at, say, the 4-5 turn, I'm going to be pounding pitching. I'm probably taking 5 straight pitchers, which will include a closer or 2 in there, probably 2 closers. So, that's a mindset you have to be willing to do and actually execute it, because there's going to be hitters you're going to like there. But you got to get that pitching. You've sacrificed some higher end guys, so now you got to build on volume. In my opinion,
especially in the DC,
and there's guys, so especially in the DC, but there's guys that I'm comfortable with there. I think people know I'm a real big Tyler Rogers fan. He's the guy that I want to get, and I'm not afraid to move him up. He's a guy I think even if he gets traded at some point, whatever, I'm not going to worry about that. You get me, 20 or so saves and you give me the ratios, I'm good. He's not a lock to do all that, but in my educated assumption.
But we've seen him do it. We know he can do it. Unlike some of these other speculative guys, we know what he can do given the chance.
And I think last year he had some really good skills. So that's, you have to be able to, if you're going to see at certain points where, say you wanted 2 pitchers in the first 5 rounds, but it just fell where maybe those pitchers that were there at the 4-5 turn, you didn't see much of a difference than who would be there at, say, the 6-7. So now you got to make that, agreement with yourself that you got to start pounding pitching. and you gotta, what guys are going to be there. And there's enough guys that you could fill in, say, 5 starters or 3 starters and 2 closers in those next 5 rounds. So, I mean, I think it's a mindset, and I think you always have to be audible in, because once you go from the DC to, like you said, the OC, and even like the main offense, the ADP is in some senses going to be useless because guys are going to be jumping. Guys are going to be jumping for their player. And I mean, in a lot of ways, it's rightfully so. If you're on like one end of the board where that guy's not coming back, and your research tells you that's your guy, that's the guy that, you should be taking, I don't have a problem with that. I don't celebrate min picks.
Yep.
I don't celebrate max picks neither, because then you could be saying, why is this guy falling?
Yeah, and why didn't I take him earlier? Like, why do all of a sudden I like him just because now he's a max pick? Yeah. Like, that's one of those. It's a great discussion point on it for a whole other time, because it's like you talk about, I don't want to draft this guy, but now he's worth the price. Well, why is he worth the price now? So,
yeah, but
well, real quick, one thing you were saying, and you just mentioned it with the ADP. And first off, you said you jumped in that 150. Like, I literally had in the shower this morning, I was like, I have none going right now, like no slow drafts, and that's not normal because I wanted to keep the brain moving, like you said. And but what I was going to ask you with this ADP thing, and you talked about jumping into different formats, but just in general, like when we do the DCs and just any draft and hold format, when we start early, like November, December, January, whatever, we're doing them because usually there's an ever-changing landscape because of moves or news or that or there. And that's what you're trying to keep yourself fresh and in tune with going into the big season. We don't have any of that right now. So how are you? I know you're obviously prepping by trying different strategies, but how are you doing things with the non-changing ADP, kind of planning for all hell to break loose pretty soon?
Well, I mean, there's going to be significant, some guys are going to really get buoyed by, where they sign or if they get traded to. Other guys are going to get hurt. Other guys, at least the perception will be their prices are going to fall. So that's been the most difficult part about it. But I mean, honestly, if you live in the East Coast in January and February, especially, are just miserable months. It's dark, it's cold. So this is what keeps me going. Once once fantasy football season ends, I gotta have something that I'm doing fantasy-wise.
That's fair.
I do love the prep too. But you look at it look at the guys later on in drafts. I mean, people might not like these guys, but I look at, I'm looking at guys that say a guy that doesn't have a home right now, free agent, Jorge Soleil.
Yep.
His last 4 months, his last 400 plate appearances, he had a walk percentage above 12, a strikeout percentage below 20. He's put up a 48 home run season like just 2 years ago, if I'm correct. Where he lands is going to be, could be a real boom to him, or it could hurt him. But he's a guy that I've been taking. A guy I like that. I've seen that progression. It's a small sample. Not saying it could hold, but if he's 250-ish, if he gets to that range and he's hitting 40+ bombs, I'm all in. That's a profile, but I don't know where he's going. But it's not scaring me away.
That's him, like guys like Eddie Rosario.
Yes.
There's a handful of those guys that you sit there and you stare at them in a draft going, I know for a fact when this ends and they sign their name on a dotted line somewhere, they're jumping a couple rounds, maybe 4 or 5 rounds. Depends on where they land, obviously, but they're jumping. And so that's where you kind of take the gamble. But it's a risk too, like you said. If they all of a sudden, what if Soler shows up in Tropicana? I'm not saying the Rays will sign him, but just goes in a situation like that, or Texas. We know that ballpark doesn't play loud. Like those kind of things makes it a little more intriguing. So it's the risk reward. The risk usually outweighs the reward for the most part. Then again, we don't know what baseballs we're using because screw the MLB. So we have.
I think those are really the 2 biggest questions for me. Like, what ball are we using? Like, just come up with one ball and just keep one standardized baseball. I don't think that's too difficult to come up with. And is there going to be a sticky surface that's allowed by the league? Which I think they got to come up with something.
Well, there's the ball they've all talked about. They use it over in I think it's Japan or KBO. They used it in the Olympics. It's got pre-stick on it. Like Joe Ryan used it in the Olympics. Said it was amazing, best baseball he's ever thrown. So it's like, let's just use that. Simple. Problem solved.
So I mean, that's a lot of things. And obviously, if they ban the shift, And, the players that got hurt by the shift, obviously you got to take another look at them.
There's some interesting names on some of those lists. I don't know if you've looked at them, but some very interesting names on those lists.
So, I mean, it's really, it's interesting. It's exciting because a lot can change even now. The 2 months I did, I just don't want to be playing a 120-game season and 7-inning doubleheaders. I want regular baseball. I mean, everything was understandable with 2020, but let's try and get like the seasons back and everything rolling as usual.
When you're transitioning from your DCs to your fab leagues, your OCs, your main events, and whatnot, I'm assuming for the most part your roster construction idea is the same. Obviously, depth is different in the two formats, and you're willing to take a few more chances in different 12s and verse 15s and whatnot. But as you're starting to make that transition, pretty much once they say we're going to have opening day, boom, you're going to start hitting the fab maybe a little harder. How do you kind of transition your draft style or your player pool kind of approach?
Let me see how I can answer this and make it sound sensible.
It's tough. It's not easy. I know, but it's just like I know you do so many of them. So
you're wiping out that depth factor where you don't need to be too deep with every in a draft champion you want to be 3 or 4 deep. So those guys that you're taking at the corners and the middles, I think maybe the pitching becomes more flexible, but I think it's identifying the core guys you'd like to build with, seeing where you can get them and having to maybe move them up a little opposed to the ADP that's now. And how are you going to build? I think the critical part is those rounds 10 to 20. Maybe the guy that's going in round 17 in draft champions is going in the 15th round or the end of the 14th round. So you have to be able to know that, make those adjustments, and is that guy worth that price at that point? Obviously, if it's a different price, is that considering the format and stuff, is that guy that can give you the 280 average with 17 home runs, a handful of steals, that was going later, but can actually help your team and help solidify some things where you can take some, other risk on some players that say have speed but don't have the average and stuff like that. I don't think I really was great on explaining
I understand it at least. I get what you're saying.
I think examining the middle of the draft and knowing where you're going to get your pockets of whatever you need, whoever your guy is, like Colton Wong, if you're a Colton Wong guy, and you see he's got an 11th round ADP, probably going to be a 10th round ADP in the main. So if you're waiting for, pick 169, maybe if you're picking at 157, you should be taking them there.
Yeah, pretty much anyone with the upside of like 15-ish stolen bases is getting pushed up just because that's just the nature of the beast. Like there's no rhyme or reason, but that's one that stands out. Guys that
starting pitching.
I was like innings eaters later on, like they might not be the most efficient innings eaters, but they have K upside or something, or they'll go there. You'll see, like you mentioned, there's like the Bazes of the world, there's the Ryans of the world. You might see moving a little differently based on some of the people in those drafts.
I think that's important. I think the pitching that you can kind of wait on, like these guys that you're willing to take a shot that they take that next step or they figure it out, that we're going whatever the 18th to 20th round. They won't be going in the 18th and 20th round because people will be looking to grab them in the 16th round or vice versa. They're going to move up a couple of rounds and stuff like that. So I think it's just paying attention. And I'm not saying ADP to me is just a guide. It's just an idea of where the market's saying these guys are going.
Expected ranges.
And then you got to fill in the you got to fill in the last piece. Is the guy worth getting pushed up? And how if I went with this, I think Bloomfield does it. A lot of people do it. Having a couple of guys each round
options. Yep.
So you're not like stuck. I think is a good deal for even people that are just starting. Just so you don't put yourself in like, oh my God, I got to have this guy.
Yep.
And then you start like panicking and stuff.
Like one thing I did, because I've talked to many people about it this year, is my big prep this offseason is roster construction. Focus so much more on roster construction, not just knowing the stats and the guys that can perform, but just know how to build a team. And so like when I do drafts now, I have the draft board and I have a healthy queue, and then I always have my roster board up on the other page. So like you can see when someone quote unquote snipes you or whatever, like where do I have to start making sure I fill things? Because position A is starting to deplete, or position B, whatever. Just ways to think about it. So that's why I think those mid rounds are huge, as you mentioned. And one thing I would suggest to people is know your risk tolerance, because depending on your league format, those last 10 picks or whatever, you can start kind of taking gambles or building some kind of depth or something, but know that part of the draft a bit as well. But
here's an important thing with a 15-teamer.
Yeah.
You're probably going to walk out of the draft, deficient in one area. It's a 15-team, as much as we want to be well-rounded and balanced, you're going to try and get as close to that as possible throughout the draft. And the fab is so important. I try and build a team in say my head or what I've come to think about. Hold on, I got this thing making. Trying to think about what happened here. I don't know what I just did, Bubs.
You're fine. You're fine on my end.
Okay, we're back. I'm sorry. I don't know what the hell happened. But I try and build a good team, basically. You build a good team, and then you can fill in the pieces throughout the season. Obviously, you can't have a team with 20 stolen bases, because then you're
just done.
Or the same thing with like 20 saves. I'm not looking to punt anything. I mean, at a point in the season, if you have to punt the category, sometimes you have to do it. But I'm just trying to build a good team, and whatever deficiencies I walk away from, I'm going to try and be cognizant. That's what I'm going to focus on in fab early on to try and rectify that situation.
When you're drafting, obviously there's the overall component where you need to just hit the nuts more often than not and run pure. Or some guys like to say, screw it, I just want to win my league. Like we've talked about it with some of the DCs, like the higher price points. I'm focused more so, or at least I think we talked about, I know I talked about it with others, that sometimes you're just focused on winning that league, because if I win that league, then it covers everything else and I can take my chances elsewhere. And there's a great strategy behind that. It's called risk tolerance and risk, like that whole deal. But when you are drafting, are you one, and maybe it's different from draft to draft, but are you one to be more like a risk taker, or are you more of a Dave Potts, let's build something boring and be successful in that aspect of it?
I mean, I'll always add some risk. Sometimes it's too risky. Like last year, I just went too heavy on Tyler Glasnow. And
that looked great for a little while.
Yeah, and it was a concern going, prior to the season. And that bit me in the ass. But, I mean, when it works out, it's great. This year, I'm just trying to have, my core guys. I don't have a list where I scratch guys off.
Yeah.
I don't need a list, because I just do enough drafts where I know I've never taken this guy.
That's pretty much how
so
I feel.
If you've done like 10 or 12 drafts and this guy is not on your team. You
have your players pretty much. You have your crew.
Yeah. So for me, I'm always going to take on some risk, because I think that's how you get, some really nice returns on investment.
Yeah.
The key is managing it, like how you can't go. And like I said, last year was a reinforcement of that.
Well, that's what someone even asked me. I wrote a risk reward article recently for like some hitters, and someone goes, well, what if I took all these guys? I said, you'd probably be in trouble. And they said, why? I said, they're risky for a reason. Like, it's like playing the lotto. If you're going to draft 7 risky guys, you have to hit on all 7. That's asking a lot. Draft 1 or 2, you might be able to get it done, but you never know. You mentioned, in a 15-team league, you're going to be deficient somewhere. Like, you don't want to have 20 steals, but you're going to be deficient somewhere. And that's common. Yes, very, very good point. Are you one of those that has like the 80th percentile? Like, I know you got the graph paper, so I doubt it, but you never know. Do you have a running log of kind of projections as your stats on your team as you're building, or do you just kind of know what you're doing and it's kind of at the back of your mind?
I'm going to be honest. I'm kind of old school, and there's I tried the computer in Vegas one year, and I screwed something up, and it screwed up my whole thing. Yeah. So I just have the either graph paper or the sheet they give you, and I just write down the players. I know in my head, what those guys do, where I'm at. I mean, it's not an exact number, but for me, I just can't do it. I'm honest with myself. I've tried it. I screwed it up, and it was a miserable experience. So, maybe it's just from having the background of working on a trading floor and doing, crazy numbers in my head and stuff like that, trading large volumes of stock. But it's something that I'm more comfortable. I mean, I'll have my computer up, say, if I aggregated some projections and then tweaked them with that kind of stuff, or as you mentioned before, like you have to be aware of, when certain positions or certain tiers are going off the board. Yep. And if the guy's ADP is a little, didn't say to take him there, well, you're not getting him if you don't take that guy there. So are you comfortable with missing that last pitcher in your tier or that last second baseman? It's just things you have to be aware of as the draft's going on. And every room is going to be different. There's always going to be something crazy that happens at a main event in Vegas. Like, holy shit, this guy fell to pick 17. Yep. Usually happens to Vlad, our boy Rotogut. He's usually the
he gets all the gifts, man. Gets all the gifts.
But so I mean, those are just things. I think it's just, after doing so many, I think you just get a feel, you get a comfort level, and you're still going to make mistakes. Like one of my biggest goals every draft is not to make that one mistake. Because I think, I think we all kind of fault in it. Some people are more disciplined, but sometimes, if you can avoid making that one mistake in the first half of your draft, believe it or not, it might sound a little silly, but I think that pays huge dividends.
No, it does. And that's why I guess sometimes to avoid that huge mistake, you take the safer pick sometimes, which in the end could still be a mistake because you passed up on so-and-so. But there are definite points to that for sure. And I'm with you. Like, I've tried the computer. Like, I get it. It's there, but I do all this work and I have it in my head, and I got enough going on in my 1 minute time or whatever to do things and click a bunch of buttons. But
yeah, I mean, like Rotolab's
it works for some. Yeah, Rotolab's awesome.
Everybody loves it, and I'll play around with it in like the preseason. But
yeah, the slow drafts I can do it. The fast drafts it's a little different.
Yeah, I just can't, and maybe that's an error on my end.
I'd say you're doing just fine. But when you mentioned like aggregate projections and whatnot, which projections do you prefer? Do you like, or which ones do you put together? What's your focus on looking at those?
I mean, the Bat X I like. I think most people are big on that for hitting. I think what Rudy does with Steamer, is really good. So I like to put that in there as well. And I even put Todd Zola's Master Balls in there as well, because a lot of people in the NFBC subscribe to Todd. Mm-hmm. And, and it just balances it out. If I was just looking at straight projections and I wasn't aggregating anything, it'd be like, the Bat X and like the Steamer projections, or just use Rudy's, how he tweaks the playing time, like the at-bats and the innings pitched. But I think you just, you have to be cognizant. You have to have an idea of the player and with an honest assessment. Like, honestly, you can look at some of these projections. You're like, wow, this guy looks great. But in reality, what's the chances he's going to hit that? I mean, is it an 80% chance he hits that? A 50% chance he hits that? So I think just being truthful with yourself. I mean, everybody wants to look at the up-end projection, or the guy's upside. But, sometimes, those guys like Nolan Arenado, and I'm not a big Nolan Arenado guy. I like him a lot more, say, in the draft champions. Yeah. But knowing you're getting that 30 home runs, 100 RBIs, and, there's something about that's, especially in that format, that really helps you.
Team Boring that plays a lot of games. It goes very well. And like, that's one of the hardest things that I think has made me a better player, is learning that kind of stuff. Because when you first start out, it's like, this Arenado sucks. Like, I want to watch something else. Like, he doesn't do it for me. He doesn't move the blood pressure at all. Yes. But like him, Goldie, like they're the perfect combo on that team. They're just it's not almost so you can plug it in. Yeah.
But, at the end of the day, they give you what you need. Yep. So, I mean, I like to look at the projections. I don't do the rolling graphs
Okay.
I'm more of a game log guy, like where I'll set up for, especially for pitchers and for hitters too. But I'll look at, we'll use a Patrick Sandoval guy. I have tons of shares of. And he had, I think, a 10, 11 game stretch last year where he averaged 6 innings pitched, had a swinging strike rate of over 15. Now, obviously, he got hurt. I think the breakout was getting interrupted. So there's risk there. He hasn't done it, say over 160, 180 innings. But I'm looking at somebody that put together a couple of months of like dominance, So, I mean, a guy like that is somebody I'm willing to take the risk on. You have to. That's a profile that I like. The walks need to improve a little, but he's still young. He's still figuring it out, and that's what I'm looking at. Or like I mentioned, the Jorge Soleil thing. Or you look at on a per plate basis, an AJ Pollock. Now you can't bank AJ Pollock for more than 400 at bats or whatever, in a season. But his last, I think, 632 at bats or plate appearances. I believe it's plate appearances. He has 37 homers, like 110 runs batted in or something like that, and a 290 batting average.
It's pretty darn good.
So on a per plate, and then if you're adding in the DH, which could maybe help him, but I'm not going to say he's going to do that. But if he does 22, 7, 280 in the 14th round, I think that's pretty damn good.
Yep.
What's the possibility of some upside?
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, there's a bunch of guys like that. That's the other thing is you kind of have to. Yes, guys are going to be injury prone, but it's like in that sample size, is it good enough that you can replacement values there? And it's tough in an NFBC because there's no IL spots. So I get that makes things tricky. Are you going to hold them and play the game? But guys like Pollock, and then there's other guys which I don't want to take risks, but Pollock is a great name to kind of think about. Yes, he might only play 400 games, but what if he runs hot? Because that's 2020 season when they had the DH. He played, I think, like 53 games of the 60. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot better than 120 of 162. And you start throwing that kind of factors in there. Maybe they can baby him because like him and Justin Turner should get a lot of love, maybe Muncy, but they'll rotate it around to keep him fresh. So now what if he plays 140 instead of 120, like you said? So it starts to give you that next step.
And I don't really go to that. That to me is like the bonus.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm just saying in your head, if you're deciding between two players at a certain point, you can kind of use a deciding factor of, well, this next step could be tremendous type situation. You mentioned Fab a few times. We got RotoGut. We can just go look at Vlad's paper and figure all that out.
Which I highly recommend.
Yeah. It's the go-to standard. Like I subscribe to like HQs and all those different ones, but Vlad's the one I look at for Fab. That's pretty much the only one. Like I'll peruse some others just in case I miss something, but if it's not on Vlad's paper, I'm probably not going to matter. But how do you approach your Fab process? I know we've kind of talked about it in the past, but how do you approach things?
I mean, I'll be aggressive on certain guys early because if I think they can really be difference makers for say the next 5 months, and I can have them on my squad. But in general, I know like last year, I started off so bad. At one point, I thought it was going to be a total disaster. And thank God it wasn't. But it definitely wasn't my best year. But it depends on your team, too. When you need to, when you got to fill in the at-bats and the innings pitched, you have to be aggressive sometimes. I think one of the things that Phil does so well is his, willingness to cut guys. Maybe sometimes I've held on a little too long, but hopefully now we get this 162. Like I said, I'm not adverse to taking shots early, but I'm going to try and be a little more conservative overall with the Fab and take the shots when I think it's really worth it. But again, you got to play it out how it starts. If you got hit with a bunch of injuries in the first month or two, you're going to have to spend some money and fill these in, and you're going to have to make the difficult cuts. Because it could be 6 weeks in where you're making some really tough decisions. And I don't think there's a one size fits all answer. It's on a team per team basis. What you need. I mean, one of the things I like to do at like around after the All-Star break is try and build a bench for say like the last 6 weeks, because I'm never the guy that has a ton of money in September. I mean, maybe that's why I got a lot of second place finishes because that last week
said about that. Yeah,
I don't have it, but sometimes you won't be there if you don't spend when you need. But I've had seasons where I've been able to build good enough benches for that stretch run, and it's really paid off well. So I think you got to look at it on a team per team basis. You need, and you got like Roto Gut Sting, which is just fantastic to just use as a guide. I'm not saying you got to use it. Yes. Everybody else is looking at it too.
Yep.
So if he's saying $84 on a guy, and you really want him, you're going to have to move that up.
Yeah, the biggest thing I look at his for is am I missing players? Like, am I going through my process because he combs everything? So that's where I really like to use him, because I like to think I'm on top of things, doing a lot, but there's always something that slips through the cracks. That's just being human. It's good to have that.
It's always great when you get that guy like the week before.
Yes,
like the fan comes out and you got that guy, and the next week all you hear leading up to the next fan is everybody talking about that guy. And so that's really it's like whether it's the closer in waiting or the hitter that's starting to get the playing time. When you can be that week ahead, I mean, just the money you save and, just the benefit to your team is fantastic.
100%. Last question I have on this strategy section here. Auction versus snake. Most people, I'd say, do snake. I could be wrong, but there's a lot of auctions. I've seen you guys an auction C. Obviously, there'll be auction mains and supers and all that good stuff coming up. I've heard the product on NFBC is great, because you guys did one, I think, the other night in like 2 to 3 hours, which is for an auction outstanding, because usually auctions take 6 hours or so, and I can't do that. That's just too much. But like a 3-hour auction, I can handle that. How does your approach to players? Because obviously in a snake draft, you kind of have to deal with how the draft goes. Auction, you can walk in there and go, hey, I want blah, blah, blah for X amount of dollars, and at least kind of get your core. How do you differentiate between the two formats?
I find I'm much better when I'm more aggressive early in the auctions. It's just, the last one we did, I was too conservative, and I kind of let pull hitter get a lot of my guys, a lot of my pitchers at least. I was pretty pissed off about that. I mean, maybe it's the gummy I took prior. But I think you can map it out. What are the guys you're interested in? Who's your foundation pieces? Obviously, I don't care. They say, well, you can get whoever you want to get. You really can't. I mean, unless you want to just blow all your money and have like a couple of studs. But, you need to know. If Fernando Tatis is going to be about $50 and you don't want to spend more than $45, most likely you're not getting Tatis. So I think writing out, or however you do it, putting it on a Excel, a couple of your foundation guys, and then your pitching. What is your pitching budget? I mean, mine's usually going to be heavier on the pitching side, but how are you going to break that down? And you got to be willing at times to go $1 or $2 more, in my opinion, because then you wind up settling for somebody else, and sometimes you got to spend an extra $1 or $2 anyway because there's nobody else left. And I think that's the worst feeling in an auction, is when you're buying those guys that were $10 for $15.
Yeah.
When, I'd rather spend the extra couple of dollars on the, those 25 to and up guys. Sometimes you got to do it. I think with the auction too is you just got to be paying attention early. If the money's just getting spent crazy, there's going to be a point where it's got to come back to earth, because there's only a certain amount of dollars. But I've noticed, I think sometimes early on you get some of the best buys because people still are waiting to see, So maybe if you throw out Burns before Cole goes out, you might get him for $1 or $2 cheaper because they don't know what Cole's price is going to end up being. Or somebody wants to buy Cole instead of Burns. Just for instance. I mean, it's something that I've noticed. It's not every time that's going to happen, but I do think you get some small discounts early on.
It makes a lot of sense. It makes tons of sense. So yeah, it's fun to watch. I keep saying I need to jump in one of these days and get the feet wet. But
Zach Waxman, he's in the he's in those all the time.
He's in every draft.
It's I have to say the software is fantastic. And like I said, if something did happen to get screwed up in the auction and it was the software's fault, we'll just you get stopped and then you just rebid on that. That I'm going to be honest with you. I did 2 so far this year. It hasn't happened, and I don't remember it happening in a very long time. Put it that way.
Awesome. Let's talk some NFBC debates, some player debates, and kind of close comparisons. You talked about how you like to look at the logs and everything. You can see kind of things that stand out differently, that maybe separate things, or however you do your process. So I picked a handful of these that have been kind of popular names that have been thrown around this draft season. And we'll start at the first base position. You got Rhys Hoskins versus Josh Bell. Hoskins keeps moving up the draft boards, which I do not appreciate. It's not helping me out at all because I've been Team Rhys for quite some time, and this is not fun. He's around pick 126 over the last couple of weeks, where Josh Bell's around pick 133 over the last couple of weeks. But it depends on who you talk to. Like our buddy Fish, I talked to Fish, and he loves Hoskins too, but he's got Bell a lot closer than I do to Hoskins. How do you go about these two?
I think they're both good. The problem with Josh Bell is, you hit like 25% fly balls. Yep. And doesn't matter if you're hitting the ball, 50% or harder. It's just you got to get that ball in the air. And we saw what he had, the 37 home runs a couple of years back. I think he's more of that 27 home run guy. Probably comes with a better batting average than a Rhys Hoskins. I think Hoskins has the greater home run potential. I love if he's going to be batting second behind Gene Segura and in front of Bryce Harper with Realmuto behind him. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty nice place to live. And we saw last year how he started off slow, if I remember correctly, and then he was like a house of fire, and then he got injured. Yep. So, I don't think you're getting a really good batting average with him. But I just think all the other stuff is going to be there as far as, the homers, the RBIs, the runs, like that whole, you're getting that 3-pack there. So for me, it's really close. I think it's more what you're comfortable with here. I think if you'd rather have that 260-ish to maybe 270 average, you go in Josh Bell's direction. If you're willing to, chase maybe 40 home runs, you're going to go Rhys Hoskins. I kind of maybe would like CJ Cron here, because
it's a good area for first base.
He's in Colorado. I mean, you got half your home games there. Your batting average is going to get, it's going to get an uptick just playing in that park. He's got the power. He's another guy that, he's got to stay healthy and stuff like that. But he's a 30 home run guy. Mm-hmm. And when you can get the 280 average, I think that's a hell of a thing. I mean, 280 and 30 home runs is a very valuable thing in fantasy.
100%. Yeah, I got zero problems with Cron, that's for sure. And it's a great spot for first base, and it goes back to what we talked about a while ago. Plan your draft out. If you're willing to take one of these, there's like 4 or 5 of them kind of close by. If you're willing to get one of those, you don't have to take the Freemans of the world and stuff early, and you can differentiate your roster real quick.
And real quick, I know I didn't give like a definitive answer, Rhys Hoskins versus Josh Bell, but I don't have a really definitive.
That's why it's a fun debate, because they're like, yeah.
Like one of the things I remember when I first got on the air or I first started writing, they're like, "Well, you have to." I'm like, "No, I don't. I mean, why? Why would I do that? If I think they're kind of similar, or if I'm looking for certain attributes, on different teams, So I don't think you have to have a clear cut opinion on something where you can say, for this team, this makes more sense, and this team, it makes more sense.
And that's totally goes back to roster construction and everything else. It makes total sense. I guess I wrote an article. I write ADP debates a lot where I kind of pick a side, but then at the same time, I wrote an article about this area of first base. I wrote up 5 of them, and I basically said, this is why they're all good in this range. Like, pick who you want type deal. So you don't have to, like you said, say, take this one guy. It all depends on what you're doing. Let's head to second base now, where we have a couple fun ones depending on if you're a believer or not. We have Jazz Chisholm, who is very polarizing. You're either all in or you're all out on Jazzy Jazz. He's going around pick 70, 73. And you got Jorge Polanco going like 3 or 4 picks after him, give or take. Polanco coming off a monster 2021 season. You got Jazz, who's got 2020 upside, but he strikes out, or he swings and misses a ton. Let's put it that way. He's the new Javi Baez. So how do you go about these two?
I mean, Polanco, I just think is a really good hitter, a very good player. He's got they both have multiple eligibility, which is great. And I'm not looking at Polanco to repeat last year with, like, say, 33 home runs, but I think he's a guy that can hit you 270 or better, hit you 20 plus homers, steal you double-digit bases. That's the key for Polanco with me. If he can get that 10 stolen bases again, it's not even the 30 home runs. He's just got to hit, he hits over 20 homers and gets you the 10 stolen bases with a 270-ish average or more. That's a hell of a play with multiple eligibility. So I'm always probably going to lean Polanco over Jazz, but I'm not averse to Jazz. He's on a couple of my teams where it made sense and it works. I think the key number for Jazz is 27%. If he strikes out 27% of the time, Jazz is going to be useful. Look, he's not going to be a big average guy. I don't think that's going to be part of his game. I don't think he has to be. I mean, you just don't want to bet 220. If he's batting in the 240s and he's hitting 20 homers and stealing 25 bases, that's very doable. I mean, what's like the league average, 244? So, I mean, for Jazz, he's going to play every day. He needs to, he needs to be at that 27% range. You look at the first 2 months, like I think it was Mike Kirkland, we were going back and forth. And he was like, well, that 1 month where he had like 19%, it was August, it was a small sample. I'm like, yeah, but the first 2 months, he was like 43% and 37% or something. So you can't say that doesn't matter. And that matters. And obviously 19% is the outlier. But I'm not saying, he's got to be around that 27% range. If he's around that 27% range, he has the playing time. Miami traded Zach Gallen for him. He's a core piece of their team. And, I think as long as he's healthy, he's going to put up those the home run stolen bases, what you are drafting him for. So for certain teams, he makes sense for me. He's not a guy that I got to have, though.
Yeah, and that's the thing with him is have your batting average kind of taken care of because it is risky with him, as you mentioned. But, like, I'm not as concerned because everyone's like, oh, he strikes out too much. I'm like, yeah, he does, but so does a lot of players these days. That's just kind of the new wave of baseball. So you kind of have to adapt a little more where we can't just start looking at these guys that don't strike out. Now, if he goes crazy, like you said, back to 35% or something, we're in trouble. That's simple. But he's also like post-pick 100 with a guy that could legit go 25-25, and there's not many of those.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And maybe this people think is a little crazy, but I'm really not going to draft Javi Baez this year, but I would put Jazz on my team.
Well, the thing is, last year I was pounding the Baez the last couple of years, but now his price is higher. And the new ballpark, and there's just certain situations.
I don't like the league change too. I've never been. I'm not really a fan of that profile, as many people aren't. But he's the outlier. He consistently. I was wrong last year. Yep. I was 100% wrong last year. He put up the numbers, and he did it again. Yep. I think it gets even harder when you got to change the leagues. We've seen players better than him change the leagues and struggle that first year.
Tricky. He just got paid. Like we see, Harper did it for crying out loud. Like it's tough to get your feet wet in the new place, especially if you haven't even got to see your team yet, basically, because we're still sitting here doing all this fun dance. So we'll see how that goes. Let's head to shortstop. Xander Bogaerts, round pick 48. Lindor, round pick 54. You got Bogaerts, who's as consistent as they come, just doesn't run a ton, so it's kind of a deterrent for some people. You got Lindor, who used to be like a perennial first round pick, maybe early second. Horrible first season. Again, you just mentioned new place, changing division. There we go. But people are hoping for a bounce back, and you get them at kind of a discount this year if you believe it.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say Xander's the safe pick here. You want to get that 25 homers or more, a floor of 280 or better. He can be a 300 hitter, and maybe a handful of steals or a little more. That's the easy winner here. But like I said, I don't have the stats to back it up, or I just got the feeling that Lindor is going to be more closer to that MVP style Lindor player. It's the second year with the Mets, and if he's in between, like they got Nemo leading off, who I really love this year. I think if this kid can stay healthy, I think he can do some really good things. But you got Marte ahead of him, you got Alonso behind him, and I know Citi Field, is not the greatest hitter's park, as people will say, unless like Pete Alonso, who can hit it out of anywhere. But when you're left-handed and you can hit it, down the line in Citi Field, you can hit a lot of home runs there too. So I don't know. It's just, if you want to say gut feel, that's what I have on Lindor. I really think he could do. We could see something kind of really nice this year. Go back to the old Francisco Lindor. I mean, that's just me taking the leap of faith gut thing. The stats don't back it up.
The thing is, we've seen it before, so it's like not a crazy leap of faith. So it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious. I'm hoping he does. It'll make that Mets team that's actually spent some money quite interesting. I know you would like that as well. So
it's the Mets stuff, we still got to worry about DeGrom. How many is he going to pitch this year? How many innings is he going to throw? We got Scherzer, who's 38. Carrasco, I like the bounce back appeal here, but he's another risk. And of course, there's the baby goat, who I love, Tyler McGill.
There's a lot to like in New York. Let's put it that way. Just don't be the Mets.
Like I said, it's the Mets. There's a lot of risk going on there as well.
Definitely took place. Let's head to the outfield for a few here. We got Tyler O'Neill come off that monster year. Can you repeat? Obviously, the helium's there around pick 40. You got Buxton around pick 45. Buxton was outstanding before. Wait for it. He got hurt again. Mm-hmm. But we know how good he can be when he's on the field. Would you rather go with O'Neill, who done it once, or Buxton, who can't stay healthy?
That is such a tough question. I think it's for a lot of people. I think in one of the drafts I was in with Zach Waxman, I think he went Buxton, and I took O'Neill like 2 picks later. And he was saying like that was, what he was deciding on. And I would have had the same tough decision there too. I think O'Neill, I don't think he's going to be batting like 295, but I don't think, look, does the better pitching in the league own him? Yeah. And that's usually the case, but he's
more often than not.
He's going to feast on the poor pitching, which, there's a couple of teams in his own division that have some terrible pitching. And he's got the speed. So I think, the power and the speed is there. Maybe just my love of Buxton, I lean a little more towards him. But I think I want to have like, a couple of shares of each, like, trade it off here or there. Because, like I said, with Buxton, what is it? In the last 3 seasons, he has like 684 plate appearances. Obviously, we had the shortened season, but, it's great when what he's been able to do and fulfill it, but can he stay healthy?
Yeah, it's tough. Like, I've been a lot of O'Neill early, but I've been slowly kind of putting some Buxton shares out there, kind of like you're saying, you kind of have a little bit of both because, man, Buxton could really
and I think with both these guys and their their skill sets, it's not a bad idea for diversifying with those two, like having some of each.
100%. Let's go a little deeper in the outfield here. Both going around pick 62, give or take. And that is Eloy Jimenez and Nick Castiano, 2 guys that we know can rake but don't steal. And Casti doesn't have a home right now. So, like, if he stays at around a Cincinnati ballpark, we're great. If he goes back to, say, a Detroit ballpark, we're in trouble. We've seen Casti's ups and downs, but where do you go with Eloy and Castiano here?
Yeah, man, I mean, for Casti's ups and downs, since he went to, like, the Cubs and stuff and then went to the Reds, we've kind of – I know he had the 1 year in the sprint where the batting average was just terrible, but I think you're going to get the 280. And maybe you won't get as many home runs in different ballpark, but I still think he's going to be a productive player. And the thing with Eloy is, like last year, you got to give him a mulligan. I mean, I didn't think he was even going to play last year. I mean, that was heartbreaking. I remember I was on the flight to Vegas when they were showing I was looking at my phone, seeing what happened to him, that injury when he tried to snag a home run he had no shot at or whatever. So, I mean, for me, this one's extremely tough because I love the possibilities of Eloy. But again, it's like the Xander and Lindor one. I mean, Castellanos, you know what you're getting. I think the floor with Castiano, you want to go there. The ceiling with Eloy, because I just think that lineup is just going to be so good. I think the White Sox are above and beyond anybody in that division. Maybe like a Bieber is back at 100%, like he says, but I don't think the pitching is where the White Sox really fear much pitching in their own division. And I looked at Eloy going into last year, I'll say, it was kind of like Mike Trout without stolen bases. And like Mike Trout don't have stolen bases where, Eloy could be a 280-plus hitter and hit you to 40 home runs. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one. I'd probably lean Eloy now because I know he's on that offense. But it's another range where if certain pitchers are there, I'm going to take the pitcher too. Yeah. I mean, there are a couple of guys I like there. So I've been real cognizant on that. So maybe I thought I'd have more Eloy and Casti. And I do have some shares of each. But if certain pitchers are there in that fifth round, I'm also going to go that direction.
And that's a great point because I think that's why I have basically neither of these two because I'm usually going hitter early and I'm grabbing a pitcher there. That's just the way it breaks out sometimes. It's never about when we talk player shares at the end of the year or something or in the draft season. It's not that I didn't like these guys. It's just when you're building your team, there's only so many times you can do. Well, things.
Also too, like say you took in the fourth round, you took a Pete Alonso. It's not as easy to take an Eloy or a Casti. One you probably need another pitcher. And now you're taking another guy with no speed in the first 5 rounds. So I'm just giving it for instance, or is it Paul Goldschmidt? If you went that route, and some people won't take the first baseman early, but I'm just trying to give examples of how you have to look at it.
Let's go to the mound real quick. You mentioned you have Wheeler as your clear 3. Right now, Wheeler is around pick 23. A pick behind him is Brandon Woodruff. What separates the two so much for you?
I think it's maybe just the innings and stuff, and the jump we've seen Wheeler make. We've seen the strikeouts come, and the innings I think is the separator here. I feel more comfortable with him. I think Woodruff's a hell of a pitcher, and I'd be fine with him. And I think you'll see Wheeler at the end of the first round in the mains. I think he's the guy, he's the pitcher that will be in there. I mean, Buehler's got a lot of love. And there are people, I'm a little nervous on Buehler this year, I'm not going to lie. So I really don't have any Buehler. But I think Wheeler's the guy that cements himself at the end of the first for the mains. But I don't think, if you ended up with Brandon Woodruff and you didn't get Zach Wheeler and you wanted that starting pitcher, I have no problem with it. For me, the separator is, the innings. I mean, Zach Wheeler's become like that, that Iron Man guy over the last couple of seasons. And
he's definitely proven that. That's for sure. So makes sense. A few more pictures here. Joe Musgrove, Max Freed going both around pick 70, give or take. Freed had that amazing second half of the season. Musgrove had a better first half than the second half. Still good, but kind of some struggles in the second half. I've been Team Freed the whole time, and I keep telling myself maybe I'm missing something here. Where do you stand on these two?
Max motherfucking Freed. Look, I mean, I think he's a really good pitcher. I don't really get worried about like hard hit rates a lot with certain pitches. I don't think it's as sticky. I mean, look at Robbie Ray, the hard hit rate he had last year. He won a Cy Young and did pretty good. But I think Max Freed has a skill of limiting hard contact. And we've seen it time and time again. And I think, he's about 38 and 13 in his last 69 starts.
Pretty good.
For Sierra, sub-4 whip. I think he pitches, he got injured with the hamstring last year and stuff. I don't think he had any arm injuries. So it held him at 165 again. He's done 165 twice. He did 165 plus the playoffs. To me, he's a 180 guy this year. And I think just on the volume, he gets you to 180 strikeouts or so. And if there's any uptick in strikeouts, he could be closer to 200 by season's end. So he throws 190 innings or 184 or something like that. I'm just a big Freed guy. I like what he does. There's other pitchers I like that I think he has similar skill sets that he goes, a round or two later. So I end up with a lot of him. Musgrove's always been a guy I've loved and I've chased, and I've always had a lot of shares. I currently own 0 Musgrove for the first time in years. It's not that I don't like him. I just like other pitchers in that range. I'll take Trevor Rogers over him every day, But I think in the second half, he wasn't as dominant as the first half. Maybe that's me nitpicking. The swing and strike rate went down a bit. He had that elite strikeout minus walk percentage in the first half. He didn't have it there. I'm not as sure with him. I don't think he's going to be bad, but there's just other pitchers there. Like like I said, I'll take a Trevor Rogers over him there. Or if there's a closer still on the board there that I think, is pretty much has a solidified job, I'll take him. You know what I'm saying? I'll go that route, say.
Yes, we have a lot of same thoughts on Musgrove. Then I just can't. I can't wrap my head around it.
I don't like him. I don't take him. So I've come to that realization that I'm not crossing him off on a list, but I really haven't been taking him.
We're on the same page there for sure. Alec, or one thing about Freed that you mentioned, I agree with is the way he limits contact. I think people need to start realizing that some guys are just pitchers. He can pitch. Like it's not, they don't have to always be a frame thrower that spin rates all this and that and the other. Like some guys.
Tom Glavine did pretty damn well for like 20 years.
That was the comparison I made the other night, just because it was the Braves. I'm like, he resembles Tom Glavine just from the left side, painting, limiting damage, and now he's increasing his strikeouts because he's getting like more savvy with his pitch mix and stuff. Like,
look, he's had the pedigree. And it was his worst year. Was what he had a 4.02 ERA or something like that.
And the thing is with him, because he'll give up fly balls, he'll have a couple rough outings. It's just the way it'll happen. That's just the way the breaks go. But like more often than not, you'll be okay.
Well, I mean, that's why I love the 162 game season.
Yep.
I want the 6 months because it usually works out in the end.
Definitely.
Everybody, even the top hitters, they're going to have a bad month or at least a bad 2 or 3 weeks. And pitchers will have, they'll lose a feel for their slider for like a couple of weeks or something. It just happens. Your arm gets tired. So that's why the 6 months and the 162 is so important to me, especially if I'm going to put down some substantial capital on the league.
I feel you. Next up here, we have Alec Manoa versus Charlie Morton, the young buck that was just amazing at times last year versus the ageless wonder, Charlie Morton and his broken leg, but he's just been a machine as well. Both going around pick 92 to 95, give or take. Charlie Morton, and we talk about kind of boring guys you can plug in. He's that guy, but you got Manoa, who's fun. So where do you stand on these two?
Yeah, Manoa's real fun, and he's the sexy pick here, but I'm probably going to take Morton mostly every time. I know he's old, and I'm not really big on older pitchers, but I guess I've been more into them the last couple of years. Obviously, I don't see how we start before April 15th, so that helps him with the leg healing. I mean, what he's been able to do the past few years, as much as I think – I don't have anything bad to say about Alex Manoa. I just think Charlie Morton's the pick here.
That's where I am, too. I have no Manoa shares because either I'm taking a bat at that point in time. I'm taking a bat or I'm taking like a Morton. That's just the way it's gone. And I always do get concerned with these young guys. Like, is there an innings limit? Now, if it's a shorter season, that could benefit. I don't think Manoa is too concerned there because he got to throw a ton last year, which is huge. But it always sits in the back of my mind. Morton just throws because the thing with the Braves is they have Morton and Freed, and then it's a mess. So they need Morton to throw. That's just the bottom line.
Well, I mean, it's sexy young arms. I mean, for me, I'll take Shane McClanahan over Manoa every time as well. I mean, but it's not saying I don't like Manoa. I don't think he's good. I think he's going to be a hell of a pitcher, and I could be wrong on that. But that's just from what I'm looking at, and from what I've seen, and what I'm projecting for this year. That's just my opinion.
I'm with you. Last pitcher we have up here, Zach Gallen around pick 127. Chris Bassett around pick 130. You got Gallen, who the arm issues, but threw the most innings out of anybody in the second half last year. And then you got Bassett, who, if you talk to, quote unquote pitching experts, they just are waiting for the blow up to happen with this pitch mix. So how do you go about these two?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say negative things about the Hound because he just, he's been like the Kyle Hendricks of the American League, where he keeps beating the expectations, and he's even been better as far as like giving you more strikeouts and stuff like that, I'd say. But I'm probably going to go with Zach Gallen here. I'm going to take the upside. I think, Gallen, as you said, he threw the most innings, and he might even throw like the most pitchers in the second half or something like that. So, I mean, I don't think it's like a landslide thing, but I'm going to go Gallen here again. When it's this close, most of the time I'm going to go with the higher upside.
Yeah, like the more I looked into Gallen, and people have pointed out the the innings and everything else, I become more at least intrigued by him, because at first, early draft season, just looking the injury, just not touching him. But now I'm much more there. And I love Chris Bassett. I love him. But
yeah, no, I mean,
and you can't deny like what people are saying about the peripheral stuff going, like you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Another key point here where these guys go. What are we talking, like 9th, 10th round? I'm trying to think. You know, I'm the top of my head, I really don't know.
Yeah, they're about like 125ish, around 10,
okay.
Yeah, give or take.
Okay, so in a 12 team, that's like around 10.
12,
so I mean, in a 12, excuse me. So I mean, at that point, you know, these aren't your anchor pitchers. So that's the other thing you're looking at. You know, maybe if it's your number 2, you know, I'd be more concerned if I didn't have any other starters. I only have like one starter coming into this range, but these guys aren't your anchors. So for me, like you said, basically for the reasons you mentioned, like I'm not concerned about the injury for all the innings he threw last year. I think he was like pounding 6 innings every time, basically. And, you know, Arizona needs him to throw innings.
There you go.
So at this point in a draft, I'm going to go with the upside guy.
All right, let's hit up a listener question here. We got one from Joe G at Joe G414. 12-team Roto League, which set of players would you rather have? Rafael Devers and Brian Reynolds, or Yordan Alvarez and Alex Bregman?
I saw this question last night, and I think it's a great question. I mean, I really don't think you go wrong with either way, and you fill it in how you have to. Look, I love Yordan. I really do, but I think him and Devers are kind of similar, say. And Devers has third base and probably could steal a handful more bases. So for that there, and I think Reynolds is more closer to a 300 hitter than, say, Bregman. I do think Bregman could have a nice bounce back this year. So I'm going to go with the Rafael Devers side, which, you know, and I said I love Yordan, but
yeah.
I think that they're getting the third base eligibility there with, you know, say 5 to 7 steals, and then getting another like 300 hitter there. So
I think the biggest part there is we still don't quite know Bregman's status. I think, like you said, the bounce back could definitely be there, but you can kind of pencil in Reynolds for, you know, 280 to even 300 potentially. Like, he's got that average. So
probably going to get traded at some point.
True.
I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be opening day, but I mean, the Pirates at some point, if he's doing what people expect Ryan Reynolds to do, there's going to be a good team willing to give up some nice prospects, which the Pirates, you know,
no doubt about it.
Build mode for like ever. So
it's fun. Real quick, since you talked about you do like Yordan, and I do too. I think he's just absolutely amazing, and the fact he stayed healthy and gained outfield eligibility is just outstanding. He's not just util only, which was always the debate. But what do you think of the comparisons? I just have to ask because it's probably a dumb question. People said, why draft Vlad in round 1 when you can draft Yordan a couple rounds later?
Well, I mean, I think people say first base is so deep. Yeah, there's a lot of good first basemen, but I mean, Vlad is uber elite. Like, he's the cream of the crop. Those guys don't compare to Vlad. Like, there's Vlad and there's like another level. To me, I mean, I get that if you wanted to go with but I see. I do think Yordan is one of the better hitters. So
he's a pure hitter.
300. It's an interesting argument. You know what? I don't have a problem, you know, taking Vlad in the first round.
I'm with you. I've done it. I've done it a couple times.
I'm like, what are you going to do for stolen bases? And maybe it's tough to take Yordan in the second. But I don't know. If you can figure out your pitching, I could go Vlad, Yordan, and, you know, get that speed in the third round, and then I'm just going to have to figure out my pitching from there.
Yeah, and then to me, and this could be just people might take us the wrong way, but I feel like if you're worried about taking Vlad early because of the steals, then you have no confidence in drafting steals later. That's kind of the way I look at it, but maybe it's wrong.
And it's tough because the steals do get –
it dries up.
But I don't think there's a big difference between Vlad steals and Juan Soto steals.
And when you're taking Vlad, it's like Soto or Kyle Tucker or Bryce Harper. Like, you're talking, 10 steals maybe? And if you can't make up 10 steals.
And if you're like a Whit Merrifield guy
–
or something, you know, you add him to your team, and you pretty much average that out. Because like I said, what are the people like? Toby's drafting, say, 2 pitchers, right?
Yep.
He's going pocket aces. He takes the one hitter and
gets a catcher.
One of the other guys is a catcher.
Yep.
Right? So maybe even as a closer. So maybe he has 3 pitchers and like JT Realmuto. Yep. So where's Toby getting his speed? You know what I'm saying? If you subscribe to that, and I like I said again, Toby's been successful, so he's got a plan. It's not like you can't, make it work.
It's very doable.
Maybe it's not as easy, starting off with a Tatis or a Bo Bichette. Obviously, you're banking in those 20 stolen bases or more and stuff like that. It does make it easier, but like I said, I don't know. If I had to start 3 hitters this year, I'm not afraid to do that. Usually I would be terrified about that.
I'm glad that you said that, though, because I think there is ways to build your rosters around it. So that's why I laugh when I hear, like, you can't do this. I'm like, no, you can.
But I do say that with a caveat. You have to be willing to commit to, like, just pounding pitching at some point for 5 rounds.
Yeah, basically, like, round 6 or 7 on, just go grab, like, your E-Rods and your Nady Evaldi's and all those guys.
In the main, if I started 3 hitters, it's probably that 4th round that I'm going to have.
Yeah, it's even earlier. Yeah, try to get it. Well, Nola would be gone, but try to get like
4 of the next 5 rounds. So pretty much going to be dedicated to pitching.
It's fun. That's the beauty of this game we play. That's the beauty of all these drafts. There's different ways to do it. There's not one set way, like you said earlier.
Old what happened last year. Yeah. I think you got to look at every year a little different. Look at what trends are starting to form and stuff like that. But
yeah, it's good stuff. On that note, we'll wrap it up, my friend. It is always a pleasure sitting and chatting with you. Any final draft talk, strategy talk, anything before we hopefully get a settlement and a new CBA to get things going?
Draft strategy, do what works for you. It sounds simple, it sounds cliche, but it's really you're not winning by trying to be somebody else or draft their players. Maybe you get 1 or 2 of them, but you're going to have to draft the full roster. This is baseball. You need 14 hitters, 9 pitchers and stuff. So, do you? And like I said, I'm going to try to remain optimistic for one more day. I feel like a damn fool, but I really
every time.
I really want to go to Vegas. I really want to see, I want to see my friends. I want to hang out. I want to go to dinner, draft against them too. Like it's, we're friends and we're competitive. And it's just a great time. So I'm really hoping. More than anything, I want the agreement so that happens.
Yep.
And, good luck to all.
I'm with you, my friend. But again, thanks for joining me. We'll do this again sometime sooner this time around, and we'll get some baseball and talk some players and maybe some in-season work or whatnot. But for those that for some reason aren't doing it, make sure you follow Matt Modica on Twitter at CTM Baseball. Always great content coming out there. And at worst, you get to see the amazing, aesthetically pleasing graph paper draft results. So go check them. And the food. My goodness. We didn't even talk about the food, Young Rory. We got a lot we could chat about some other time. We got a lot of fun.
I kind of do like a smoothie in the morning and like a meal at night, or sometimes, so I've kind of curbed my appetite, but when I do eat, I eat right.
Yes, I appreciate it. I'm a foodie, man. I love it, and I love Italian food, and you bring it home, obviously. So I'm a big fan of that. But again, check them out on Twitter. No, always. This was Bench with Bubba, episode 446, folks, with the one, the only Matt Modica. Catch you guys later.